Either we heal as a team, or we're going to crumble. Inch by inch, play by play, till we're finished. We're in hell right now, gentlemen. Believe me. And we can stay here, get the shit kicked out of us, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell. 1 inch at a time. You know, when you get old in life, things get taken from you. I mean, that's part of life. But you only learn that when you start losing stuff. You find out life's this game of inches. So is football. Because in either game, life or football, the margin for error is so small. I mean, 1/2 a step too late or too early, and you don't quite make it. 1/2 second too slow, too fast, you don't quite catch it. The inches we need are everywhere around us. They're in every break of the game, every minute, every second. On this team, we fight for that inch. On this team, we tear ourselves and everyone else around us to pieces for that inch. We claw our fingernails for that inch. Because we know when we add up all those inches, that's going to make the fucking difference between winning and losing. Between living and dying. I'll tell you this, in any fight, it's the guy who's willing to die who's going to win that inch. And I know if I'm going to have any life anymore, it's because I'm still willing to fight and die for that inch. Because that's what living is. There's 6 inches in front of your face. Now, I can't make you do it. You got to look at the guy next to you. Look into his eyes. Now, I think you're going to see a guy who will go that inch with you. You're going to see a guy who will sacrifice himself for this team because he knows when it comes down to it, you're going to do the same for him. That's the team, gentlemen. And either we heal now as a team, or we will die as individuals.
Welcome, one and all, to the most badass show of all. It's Down the Rabbit Hole with Popeye from Federal Jack. Today is Sunday, May 22nd, 2011. And today I have a special guest. His name is James Walbert. And he's here to tell everybody about his story, about how he's been tagged with RFID chips, gang stalked, and we also have an elected official coming on as well after the next break, who's going to tell you a similar story about what he's gone through. So this stuff is real, it's happening, and we need to get the information out there. So, James, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell the listeners about what you've been through.
Hi, my name is James Walbert. I'm a maintenance technician and an inventor in the city of Wichita, Kansas, in the United States. In the year 2004, I had created an invention. A few years after that, I created several more inventions. But what's most important is that I had woke up in February of 2004, very soon after creating an invention, a method and apparatus for sanitization of beverage cans. It's worth a lot of money. And I started to market it. Well, very soon after that, about a week into it, I woke up with 2 bloody ears, as well as some people around me that were close family members. I didn't think anything out of the ordinary had been going on, except for the fact I had gone to sleep on a Friday night, and I had woke up on a Monday morning. So that gives me about a little over 72 hours of lost time. I wasn't real sure what had happened. When I had woke up, my ears down inside my throat was really swollen and hurting very bad. So I had cleaned it out with a Q-tip, and I discovered that there was a lot of blood to the point where I could actually squeeze it out of the Q-tip. So I'd gone to a minor emergency outlet up here, and the doctor had started probing down inside my ear, and he had found something that was metallic, and it actually had a very strong reflection coming back at him. So he had asked me if I had put something in my ear, and of course I was 33 years old at the time, so I had explained to him that no, I had not stuck anything inside my ear myself. I certainly wouldn't inflict or self-induce such damages to myself. So from there, he had made a documented report and asked me if I had any more trouble with it, to go ahead and come back in and see him specifically, because he did recognize that the fact that there was a foreign body stuck down inside past the laceration in my left ear. The right ear checked out to be okay, but it had the same appearance as well. So about a week later, maybe a little bit longer than that, I had been at work, and I started noticing ham operators, trucks with antennas covered with antennas all over their trucks. These trucks were following me, following my family, following my ex-fiancée, which is co-inventor. So they were definitely there for that purpose and that purpose alone. Very shortly after that, I had caught wind that they were able to see us, like maybe in our home. They were able to stalk us and to view us. So I had gone through a very quick process of gathering evidence and information over like the next year or so. In the year 2008, I was able to achieve the very first protection from stalking, electronic stalking, as well as electronic harassment. I had posted that to a few people, and within 2 weeks, it hit probably 500,000 websites, and it got huge. Wired News picked it up. Dave Hambling with Wired News picked it up. He had pumped it out to quite a few people on the internet with the Wired News magazine blog. And it made there, and it did really super well there. I got lots of reviews. The story wasn't bent too far out of shape. I mean, it was still very credible with lots of facts and evidence. Well, soon after that, I was able to validate my case again. So I had filed for a federal lawsuit against local police departments as well as entities around the Wichita, Kansas area for gross negligence of duty as well as deprivation of civil rights. Today, the story is sitting on probably several million websites, as well as just debuted in 14 Times magazine, 35,000 plus copies, hard copies, as well as about 35,000 views on their website as well. And it actually made #1 featured story for the digital edition online. So,
wow, incredible. See, for people that don't know, James contacted me months ago, and I was going to interview him strictly from my website, but I knew that I was going to be once I found out I was getting my own show, I wanted to get the show going, work the kinks out, and then, once I could start to have guests on, which I've been doing, I've just been, booking guests. And I wanted to in fact, I contacted you and said, hey, James, I got the radio show going. I want to get you on, and he's one of my first very high priority guests because I want people to know what happened to him, because I looked into it when he first contacted me, as any good journalist should, or broadcaster, should. And, his story is very credible. I mean, the courts found that what he's saying actually happened to him and was done to him. So for a court of law to actually, agree with him, and then, he's been interviewed by Wired magazine, multiple other agencies. He's been on the Bob Duskin radio show. He's been on other radio shows. James just wants to get his story out. He's not selling T-shirts. He's not selling DVDs. He doesn't have bumper stickers. He's not making any money off this. In fact, he's probably putting himself at risk going on the radio and talking about what happened to him. But he feels that it's important that other people know what's going on. And I got to commend that. I respect that a lot, that you've been through all this stuff and you still have the cojones to stand up. That's very respectable, James. So for myself and for the audience, we thank you very much for having the courage to come on the show today.
Oh, well, thank you. I definitely appreciate it. I have to do something. I've become aware of throughout the years from 2004 until now. That's 7 years. The first 3 years of my research, basically investigating my own case and past cases that have basically failed to prove their strong points, or to validate their case, period, in front of any courts. The reason why is because they have nothing but speculation to build on. I had basically stood for the first 3 years of observation and recognition of everybody else's failures. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean it in a strategic way. And you're never going to get, very far if you're, falling like a pack of lemmings, just right off the cliff with the rest of them. I couldn't do that. I observed everybody else's failure. I built from that block right there. And then I started to actually see what these people were lacking in their lawsuits or even in their claims completely. And it was 100% credibility. Most of the claims are laid upon speculation or...
James, hold that thought right there. We're going to break. Guys, stay tuned. We'll be right back. You're listening to Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Popeye. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everyone. It is Sunday, May 22nd, 2011. This is Down the Rabbit Hole. Just for the listeners, in case you want to go to the chat room, I'm going to spell it out phonetically for you. Okay, in case you don't know what that means, it means I'm going to spell it out using words. So get ready. It is Delta. You got that? You got a pen? Everybody ready? Good to go? Delta. Tango.
Delta.
Romeo. Hotel. Foxtrot. Juliet. Dot. Chat. And go. That's CHATANGO. I didn't feel like spelling that out phonetically. .com. Okay? So it's down the rabbit hole, FJ, but just the first letter of each word. So, save the link so you guys know. Or you can just go to federaljack.com, click on the chat room link, and it'll bring it up, and you can sign in there. And if you're already signed in to the Chat and Go chat service, then you'll just automatically be signed in when you go onto the chat room page. So check it out. Okay, before we went to break, we were talking to James Walbert, and he got to introduce himself and tell you guys a little bit about himself. And as I promised, we also have... today we have two guests, and we have our second guest was able to join us after the first break, as I said, and he is an elected official. Let me repeat that. An elected official. So the people of the county that he works in elected him to his job. Okay? He's an elected official in San Bernardino, California. San Bernardino County, California, I should say. And he has gone through the same experiences that James has. And it's very important to get this stuff out there because these guys aren't crazy. These aren't like, this isn't some fat 45-year-old guy who doesn't shave or shower in his boxer shorts sitting in his mom's basement. He's an elected official. James is a very intelligent inventor. These guys are not by any means retarded or crazy. So they can't just have a label put on them and be brushed under the rug or brushed aside as easily as the New World Order would like them to be. So without wasting any more time, I'd like to introduce Dave Larson. Dave, say hello.
Hi, thanks for having me on this show. I appreciate it.
No problem. Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, like you're as much as you're comfortable talking about, and then explain to them what you've been through and the things that have happened to you.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm an elected official in November 9.
Dave, you're kind of breaking up. Do me a favor and try to get near like a window if you can, because your phone's just kind of breaking up a little bit. Make sure it didn't disconnect him. All right, we're having a little phone problem with Dave right now, but that's not a big deal. James, continue with explain. The audience as well as myself, I had a lot of issues when I first tried to look into gang stalking, and I wasn't really sure. I thought gang stalking meant gangs, like the Bloods and the Crips, stalking people for going against them or whatever. And it turned out I was completely wrong. So I know a lot of other people have had the same idea of what gang stalking is. Do me a favor and try to explain to the audience exactly what gang stalking is.
Okay, gang stalking would incorporate one or more individuals that are focused upon a targeted individual. The terminology behind a targeted individual would rely upon a program that is designed, it is specifically designed to specifically terrorize this individual to the point of over-observation or maybe a hyperactivity of intervention of a person's life. And they will stalk them usually at work. They will usually move in around them if they live in an apartment complex or a small community. I've even seen people that live in secure gated communities that are experiencing the exact same things. And these things don't start with just low level, maybe poor income or ghetto, style of life. These go all the way up to very lucrative individuals that are wealthy, as well as powerful individuals that are in office, such as Mr. Larson. These people will start to experience literally gangs of people that have been hired out. It could be either contracted out by the government. It could be either contracted out by private detective agencies as well. We have found that as well to be a very prevalent problem. These people will literally focus in all their time and efforts on terrorizing one person. And a gang can incorporate between anywhere 3 to 15 people. And these people will, or 20 people, sometimes even more. It just depends on the particulars of the situation. These people will start to experience, the targeted individual will start to experience things that are very out of the ordinary. They will start being followed. They will start being listened to. They'll start to experience elements of electronic harassment as well. Electronic harassment can range from just the simplicity of phone tapping, eavesdropping, as well as stalking them. What I'm finding is that ham operators seem to have a big hold in this area for some reason. And it very well may be because of the exclusivity of the equipment that's involved. And what I found in my case is that it is ham operators for sure, and there's a lot of radio frequency telemetry that occurs, a lot of radio frequency telemetric, triangulations and things like that. I had wondered for a long time how they were able to track the human body with no receiver around them at all. I had searched for many years to find these fantastic weapons that exist that track just the human nervous system, or maybe like a brain fingerprint or signature. What I had found in my particular case is that none of those things are being used upon myself. What's being used upon myself is an RFID buried in my right trapezius. Now, this has been confirmed by Dr. John Hall, Dr. Hildegard Staniger. There's several other doctors. These are 5 medical doctors. And these people aren't my neighbors. These people are these people have degrees. They have high educations. They are medical practitioner professionals. I had the pleasure of meeting up with State Representative Jim Guest, and these people have issued letters of support. These people have recognized the implants. They have recognized my particular case. They have recognized the particularities of my case. And I had touched base on earlier, I was able to validate these things in court. And the reason why I was able to validate them is that I also had 2 eyewitnesses, one former victim, one's a PhD scientist of orthology. So when he had seen the telemetric equipment that were involved from these vehicles that had been stalking me, we were able to put 2 and 2 together and realize that these people are dead serious. These people are not, playing games. Who's ever done this to me has put it in a very high financial bracket level of expenditure. These people are spending money to do this to me. This is not something that your neighbor could do. This is not something a guy across the street could do. This is something that is very sophisticated. It is very lucrative. It's very intellectual. These devices are very exclusive to law enforcement, to military operations. I wouldn't step off into the area so much as, the application of mind control being applied to my particular case. I do know that there are attempts of situation control, And there's also attempts of mind control also with gaslighting.
Mind control. It's such a large topic in itself, James. I could probably have you on in fact, next time I do a special about it, if you're willing to, I want to have you on just so you can speak to it about that. Guys, we're going to break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
You better believe this. Mary Magdalene giving birth to the children of Jesus, the evolution of the world, bloody and dramatic. Human beings killing monkeys to conquer the planet, the kingdoms of Africa and Mesopotamia. Machine gun your body with depleted uranium. This is the...
Welcome back, guys. Today is Sunday, May 22nd, 2011. This is Down the Rabbit Hole, and I'm your host, Popeye from FederalJack.com. Last segment, we were getting into talk to an elected official from San Bernardino County, California, and just as Dave was going to speak, his phone started to have technical difficulties, and I just find it kind of interesting because during the before I brought him on during the break, his phone was working perfectly. So, you got to kind of, I guess, take him serious. It could be a technical flaw, whatever, but I mean, like the old World War II bombardiers used to say, you get the most flack when you're right over target. So perhaps somebody didn't want you to hear what he has to say. Perhaps it was just a technical glitch. Who knows? Anyway, Dave, welcome back to the show. Go ahead and tell the listeners about yourself and tell them what's happened to you and what you've been through.
All right, Popeye. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to your listeners. And it is true, I am an elected official at the county level. I prevailed in the November 2009 consolidated election. And what I'd like to share with your listeners is very important because, by all means, as you mentioned earlier, this is not a new endeavor for the government. This is not a new thing for the CIA. The use of biomedical surveillance and that kind of activity has been ongoing for many, many years with the CIA. And there is some declassified documents that have been released to the public, and those documents are fair game for discussion here on this radio program. So before we go into what's happened recently, I'd like to touch a little on the history, because the history that has happened that we know about says a lot about what's happening today. And primarily, what we know is that the Senate back in 1977 investigated the CIA activities, the MK Ultra program, and that Senate committee was chaired by Senators Ted Kennedy and Senators Inouye. And they took the CIA to task over these activities, and what they discovered was very disturbing. What they discovered was that the CIA was using unwitting U.S. citizens as research subjects. The program activity involved the use of devices for remote monitoring of physiological signals. And in addition, additional declassified documents showed us that they were using these medical devices to deliver drugs. It was discovered that there was an ability to surreptitiously deploy the biomedical devices, covertly or secretly. They were able to get these medical devices into people without them knowing about it. What was discovered was that the medical devices aren't used just for surveillance. They're also used to actually control and manipulate behavior. And as the director of Central Intelligence articulated to the Senate committee, was that there was also a capability to target an individual with executive direct type action. So we're talking about three issues here. We're talking about being able to spy on somebody. We're talking about the ability to control or manipulate their behavior or actions. And three, we're talking about a capability to actually eliminate their existence. So this is no joke by any means. This is technology that has existed. The Senate has already investigated these activities, and they found that the activities were very repulsive. They undermine the civil rights and liberties of Americans. And now I'd like to get into a little bit about what we're seeing today. And what we're seeing today is much of the same activities that we saw back in the 60s and 70s. What we're seeing is that today the defense and intelligence agencies of the government can deploy these biomedical devices using the provisions of a rendition. The rendition statute has been the topic of some controversy. There was recently several CIA agents, including former Deputy Director Stephen Kappes, who have been convicted, tried and convicted in absentia in an Italian criminal court for these rendition practices. In that particular instance, a gentleman was pulled into a van off the streets of Italy. He was rendered unconscious with an anesthesia, and they haven't articulated what happened to him while he was under anesthesia. But it is at that time that the biomedical devices can be deployed upon a target during the provisions of a rendition. Now, I think I've spoken to James Walbert before about this, and I think he's on the same page as I am, is that nobody has a problem with the U.S. government, the defense and intelligence agencies directing these kind of intelligence activities at terrorists, those who seek to do us harm. The main problem is that these provisions have been abused domestically. There have been juveniles who have been affected by these provisions. There have been elected officials affected by these provisions. And what's very important here is to look at the events of Watergate. It is absolutely ridiculous, in my opinion, to think that the President of the United States would be impeached and indicted for using a phone tap. There was more going on at Watergate than a phone tap. And there is
I've heard that they were trying to get rid of Nixon because he knew too much about the Kennedy assassination, and he was trying to cover his own rear end and any involvement, with Operation 40, because Operation 40 had been turned around and partly used to take out Kennedy. So he was trying to, from what I understand, he sent in, E. Howard Hunt and them to go, because E. Howard Hunt was part of Operation 40, which was, CIA. I mean, this is all interconnected. Like, the stuff that you guys are going through now is connected to, as you said, Operation COINTELPRO, which now we still have the COINTEL, the counterintelligence, but there was actually an operation called COINTELPRO, which is counterintelligence program, and that was the stuff that they ran on Martin Luther King Jr. and all them, and it's the same kind of stuff, except now we have the more technologically advanced version of that.
That's a good point. And like I said, a lot of what we're seeing today is very similar to what we saw in the 60s and 70s. And what's highly disturbing is when you start to consider the fact that a capability does exist to actually control and manipulate the behavior of the affected individuals. When you start, and I don't think anybody wants to take away a capability from the CIA. However, when they start using such a capability on the other two branches of government, that poses a significant problem, because now you're starting to undermine our democracy, and now these activities are starting to hurt all Americans when that happens.
Well, let me ask you this. Why would they, and I'm not picking on you in any way, shape, or form by asking,
sure,
but why would they tag, first I'll have you answer it, and then I'll give you about 4 or 5 minutes to answer it, and then once we come up from the break, James, I'll bring us back in. I'm going to ask you the same question. Why would they tag you? So, Dave, go ahead first. Why do you think that you were tagged, and why do you think you're being gang stalked in this way?
Well, I think the deployment of the biomedical product, and let me just clarify something here. I have been directly involved with biomedical R&D efforts since March 1997. I have an informal relationship with contract personnel. I have had a medical doctor surgically remove medical devices that were placed by contract personnel. I have substantive knowledge of some of the activities that have occurred. I sat next to the principal investigator of the contract on a bar stool, and I've actually had many discussions with many of the contract personnel regarding these activities, regarding some of the R&D efforts. And there is we're talking about many, many, many years of R&D. So initially, the biomedical product was deployed, and that's what they refer to it in the intelligence community, as they call it the biomedical product. It's sort of a generic umbrella encompassing the medical devices and the ability to interact with those medical devices. The biomedical product was developed using innocent American civilians. I believe there were people like George H.W. Bush who asserted that the only way to develop the product was to use unwitting citizens. It was very important to them to use unwitting citizens as research subjects. And the ugly truth is that even after the Senate investigated MKUltra, even after these things were discovered, even after it was deemed to be repulsive and unlawful, these activities have continued. And there have been officials who have abused national security provisions. They have abused their authority.
Outrageous conspiracy theories.
It doesn't surprise me that officials would abuse their authority or their positions, with, you know, their access to certain things because of their security clearance. All right, guys, we're going to break. Stay tuned. Listen to Down the Rabbit Hole.
Yo, Gemini,
Micro 1650 AM, the Orion Talk Radio Network.
And I say both, as I continue to blame the Knights Templar and the Hospitallers, the real reason New York lost their towers. Don't sit back or hesitate to react to the impact. Many taking a nap. In fact, they would fake an attack to make way for the Patriot.
Welcome back, guys. This is the final segment of the first hour. Sunday, May 22nd, 2011. This is Down the Rabbit Hole, and I'm your host, Popeye, from FederalJack.com. When we went into break, Dave was answering my question about as to why he was tagged, so I'm going to propose the same question to James. James, why do you think you were tagged, and why are you being gang stalked? Is it because of your inventions and the stuff that you've made to better mankind?
Well, at first I was very unaware of what was going on, and I was very misunderstood my own self. I had misunderstood the situation completely. I had no idea that this thing could have any government ties. I had no idea that it could be focused, on something so petty. So for a little while, I had no idea why I was being targeted or being stalked. With two private investigators investigating the case, what they had both found is that the ones that are doing this have basically committed the crime for the theft of intellectual properties. I'm sitting on one invention that's been valued to be well within the billions of dollars range, as well as 11 other pieces of intellectual property that are to be introduced at the military level, Department of Defense level.
And this is all your stuff that they're stealing, basically, correct?
Well, they are attempting to steal. Yes, we have contacts that have been able to tell myself that they have, without a doubt, with private information that they have taken from me, such as Social Security card numbers, driver's license numbers. I mean, and these are personal identification factors. I mean, these are things that validate, my identity as James Walbert. And what the importance is here is that, in reality, James Walbert is a maintenance technician that lives in Wichita, Kansas, and the simplicity applies at that level. I mean, it's as simple as that. At their level, what they're seeing is James Walbert is an intellectual property owner of potential of billions of dollars worth of inventions that I have. And we had thought that, I myself had thought ignorantly in the days of the infant stages of the actual crime being committed against myself, I had really had no reason why. The guy that, the suspect that I had put the restraining order against with certain electronic provisions, he had actually approached myself and told me that he and his friend had done this to people before, that they have levels, the contacts at, whatever federal level that they need them to be at to get away with the crime, that I might as well just give him the invention or sign a larger percent over to them per the contract, which was an impossible thing to do because we were signing a promissory contract, which is a legal document of issue. I can't go back in and change that unless all parties agree. And, of course, I disagreed. He's wanting, to take half of what I have, and that's not what we had agreed to begin with. If there was any discrepancies, of contractual rights or any applications thereof, I would have had expected him to, write it into his own contract. So that's what I had asked him to do. I didn't want personal investors as in friends or family. It's not good business ethics to, practice at that level. Usually angel investors or outside lucrative intellectual investors, there are investors that are set up just for intellectual property owners, such as inventors or other intellectual property owners. So with that going on, I went ahead and just blew that off and allowed this guy to invest anyways. So that's what my own personal experience is. Now, years into it, I started to learn from other people, as well as other cases such as Mr. Larson's, that there is definitely a government element here of involvement, that these ham operators that are following me have now got towers, that they have small communication towers that are triangulated in conveniently on my property. And these are not statements that I'm making, by myself. These are statements that have been backed up by such investigators as like the William J. Taylor agencies, which are responsible for Karen Silkwood cases, Iran-Contra, extremely high-profile government cases where he has busted the government several times before, taking these practices against individuals such as what Mr. Larson is touching base on. So to go back and revisit the point that Mr. Larson was making, this is not the first time that the government has ever done something so malicious to individuals that are, residing, constituents of the United States. And these are not something that is at a point of compliancy. I'm a non-consensual victim. I would never consent to something so invasive. These are things that, these are crimes that are not only, invasive of privacy. These are crimes that are at the sexual abuse level of adolescents. Of children, observing people in the privacy of their homes, sexual abuses that have been very violating towards very young children under the age of 10. So these are not, simple crimes that you'll find on the internet, as being, labeled as mind control or a psyop or, something taking it off the well-beaten path of, a discredited individual or just the whole application of the crime itself. These are things that are going on that are behind the scenes that not very many people are aware of, is the truth of the foundation, the validity of the situation. And that's what my main goal is, is to bring out the validity of the situation, that these targeted individuals, these people aren't making this up. It can't be something that is, more humiliating to an individual, than to give testimony in front of Congress about, withstanding abuses with biomedical equipment. Well, where would these individuals get this information from? It's not something that they have concocted in their head. It's not a delusional, situation that is self-applicative. But what it seems to be to me is that what Mr. Larson's touching base on is 100% validation. What Mr. William J. Taylor is touching base on with many solved cases is 100% validation. State Representative Jim Guest, Congressional Member Todd Tiehart, all these people are backing my case 100%. And it's due to the validity of what I'm saying. MRIs and CT scans, the CAT scans, we're finding these objects in my body right now. There's also another inventor.
How many, not to interrupt you, James, but how many devices do you have in your body, just so the listeners know what you're actually going through?
We've been able to notably find, and these are, these are not your simple, Verichip, like what the Verichip is designed to. The Verichip is buried in, the type of implant is buried in my right trapezius is designed to track me. When you're in that field of being tracked, that can introduce you into a field of propagation of several non-lethal weapons, infrared spectroscopy, microscopies. There's things that are, and that's what Mr. Larson was touching base on, was biomedical equipment. So these things are able to actually alter your nervous system and to affect you. But what we've been able to validate so far are 2 neural prosthetics, a tracker, as well as several other devices. Up to 5 implants are in my body right now. And 1 is a tracker, and the other 4 are prosthetics. 2 of them are confirmed at the neural level, which means that they actually make a neurological access. So that's where the tip boat, term of mind control is somewhat applicable, but not so much in the bizarre realm that these most people have bent it out to be. And Mr. Larson has also touched base on the fact that they're able to throw remote behavioral influence onto people and manipulate particular situations to where they can literally dumb down relatives around them and friends around them to where they will literally accuse the victim just overtly, just straight to their face, of things that these people probably wouldn't even have the intellectual ability to even understand what they're saying or the accusations that they're usually making. And that's what Mr. Larson was touching base on, was the fact that these people are able to manipulate whole situations with things that are indicative to gaslighting and gang stalking. Gang stalking is going to incorporate the individual players, whether these people are in possession of radio telemetric equipment that is able to couple with the human nervous system, or they actually have a subvocal, at the top of microscopy. It's an implant that goes in your neck, and it's able to actually detect your subvocals, which a lot of people are mistaking for thought. It's a preemptive, it's a preliminary of cognition. So, with that going on, as well as neural prosthetics, they're actually able to observe neural functionality, at the cognitive level. And cognition, for listeners, is a preliminary thought process that happens to say beforehand, like if your determinations, if you're going to take a left or a right at a corner, and you're a victim of this technology, they're able to see that. Now, as far as full, prosterial cognition is like a neurological application of like a whole game plan. I mean, very well may be able to pick out bits and pieces of it, but as far as, forcing true thought, I'm still out on the fence about that. I've seen some serious technology out there that, like what Mr. Larson was covering, that is at the research and development level of like Biotronics, the Alfred Mann Foundation. The technology that they have is just, it's inquisitive. It's fantastic technology. I mean, it's amazing. This stuff can be used to help people. Instead,
they actually just showed something like what you're talking about, but a little bit bigger of a version. It's a box. This guy had implants put into his spine. He was a young guy. He was in a car accident. He's paralyzed from the chest down. And now he's literally able to, he's still working on it. And you see that, with help, they're teaching his muscles and his legs and stuff how to walk again because, after being atrophied for so long, that does require it. But this guy is able to move his muscles and stuff again with his own thoughts. So it's incredible what they can do to help you. But if they could do it to help you, the military never does anything to help anybody. They always do it to intimidate, harass, and eventually eradicate, because that's what the military does. All right, guys, stick around. This is the end of the first hour. We'll be back in a few minutes. We're going to pay the bills. You don't want to miss the second hour.
I was only 5 and I was the only surviving witness. My entire village burned to the ground. He wore a serpent in his crown. Happily committed murder with a frown. And an army of black hooded fiery skull generals and a sorcerer with a cast. Never be peace. This is the point from which I will die, succeed, live in the struggle. I know I'm alive when I bleed. From now on, it can never be the same as before. Because the place that I'm from doesn't exist.
Welcome back, guys. It is hour 2 of Down the Rabbit Hole with Popeye from FederalJack.com. I, of course, am Popeye, your host. Today's Sunday, May 22nd, 2011, and today I am joined by two very special guests, two very brave individuals, Mr. James Walbert and Mr. Dave Larson. Both of these guys are very brave because they're willing to come out and, dare to brave the mockery that people, oh, ha, ha, you people are crazy. And they go, no, look. And then they have MRIs, X-rays, even the court is now backing them. These guys are not a joke. And what they're going through is horrific. And the fact that they have the courage and the cojones to stand up to, whatever evil is doing this, whether it be a lower level within the ranks or a higher level in the ranks of the New World Order, the people that would do this are, and know the technology exists, are bad people. Okay? So it doesn't matter really what rank they are, what level they're at, they're evil. And these guys have a brass set for coming out and telling everybody what's been going on to them. I find it interesting that poor Dave keeps getting cut off every time he tries to talk to us on his cell phone about this. During the break, we could discuss anything mundane, and as soon as Dave started to bring up anything important, his cell phone would start to crackle and stuff. And then you could say, if Dave mentioned Britney Spears, nothing would happen. But as soon as he starts to mention mind control and RFID chips, he gets cut off and his cell phone keeps dying. So like I said, when you're over target, you get the most flack. So apparently he's not lying, and apparently him and James must be credible. I mean, obviously they are. I already know they're credible. I'm just being sarcastic. Dave, tell the audience about your case and where they can go read about it. James was telling me there's an entire webpage devoted to what you've been going through. So tell the listeners where they can go check out your story for themselves.
Absolutely. Thank you. My website is www.popeye, electlarson.com. That's electlarson, LARSON.com. And I have uploaded some selected court documents, filings, and that sort of thing. Probably the best way to look at the evidence would be to pull up the civil complaint and look at the attached articles of evidence. And it is a pretty compelling case. My case, perhaps more than any other, is very well documented. Like I said, I've had medical doctors remove medical devices. These medical devices were placed by contract personnel. I have sat next to the contract personnel. I have had discussions with contract personnel, and there are some significant problems. And just to clarify and to stay on point here, we're talking about a couple of things here. We're talking about, one, research and development. And research and development has occurred using innocent American civilians as unwitting research subjects. And this is very much like what happened during MK Ultra and these other activities from the 60s and 70s. Now that we're in a post-9/11 era, what we're seeing is operational use. I think we're past the point of R&D, and they're actually using this stuff operationally now. And my biggest complaint and my biggest fear is that we need to have a line here. There is a difference between using this stuff on a terrorist in Abu Ghraib and using it on an elected official in the state of California or in Washington, D.C. Those are two very different things. Because what's very important here is we're not talking just surveillance. We are talking about an ability to not only place a target under surveillance, but to actually control and manipulate their behavior.
Did this wake you up, Dave, to the New World Order? Did this kind of, like, did the experience that you're going through wake you up to what's going on?
Well, it's disturbing. It's extremely disturbing, and it is an eye-opener. And I think a lot of people are complacent because this kind of thing isn't in the news. It's not in front of their face. But there are some very reputable sources out there, primarily the Inspector General from the Central Intelligence Agency. And if anybody's wondering about this stuff, or if anybody thinks that they're affected by this stuff, I would highly encourage every member of Congress to read the Inspector General report from 1963, in which the CIA IG documents explicitly that innocent Americans were being used as unwitting research subjects, that a capability was being developed to deploy these medical devices surreptitiously. The Inspector General's report, right in the report, says that CIA was using devices for remote monitoring of physiological signals. Now, the other documents from MK Ultra substantiate that they were using national brand shortwave radios, EEGs, and other sort of equipment. And without getting into too much detail about the capabilities, because I don't want to cross the line where we're disclosing operational capabilities, but to simplify what's going on here is that medical devices are placed into a victim surreptitiously when they're unconscious with an anesthesia, and the CIA has refined the capability to deploy this stuff without the victim knowing about it. Once those medical devices are placed, and they're placed during the provisions of a rendition, that's the legal framework that is being used. During the provisions of a rendition, the medical devices are placed. Once they are placed, they can interact with those medical devices using FCC-regulated radio spectrum. The contractor I am familiar with received an FCC license that is good through 2012. So at the current moment, this program is good through 2012. It's funded in Congress through 2012, and it is the FCC license that is allowing intelligence personnel to interact with these medical devices is also good through 2012. Now, and again, I want to be crystal clear on this, is that there has to be a line on how this is used. I think the biggest problem we're seeing today is that the Bush administration was able to assert that they may deploy these medical devices upon anybody they want at their sole discretion, and then keep the identity of the affected individual a secret. And that's primarily the ghost detainee and ghost detention practices. And this is the legal framework that I think is being exploited, is that can describe a detainee, not somebody who is in the custody of the government, but somebody who is in the custody of or otherwise under the control of the U.S. government. So that part that says that you can be otherwise under the control of the U.S. government and be a detainee, that means you don't have to be in the physical custody of the government to be a detainee. It is my allegation and my belief that these provisions have been exploited domestically to subject people who don't even know it to a strange form of indefinite detention. And
is there anything that these people could specifically look for, like that either one of you, either Dave or James, could tell the listeners? Because somebody in the chat room asked, are there specific symptoms that someone should look for that might be a red flag that they've been, tagged with a chip unbeknownst to them? I mean, it's creepy enough that they could put a chip in your skin. It's creepier the fact that they could nail you and you wouldn't even know it.
Yeah, no. Let me be crystal clear on this. They have the ability to surreptitiously deploy this biomedical product. The people they do this to, they wake up the next day and they go to work and they have no idea what hit them. Back in 1997, when this stuff was deployed on me, they weren't quite bad. There are instances in which people have woken up during the deployment of the biomedical product. And there are instances like that. However, today, they can deploy the biomedical product and the person won't even know what hit them. And without getting into too much detail, I just want to just touch briefly on these kind of symptoms, is that the basic capability here is to record from the biological system. Now, if they put these medical devices in the optical nerve, then they're going to be able to record what you see. If they put them in the auditory nerve, they're going to be able to record what you hear. If they put them in the muscles of your arms and legs, they're going to be able to record that EMG activity.
How would you know, is there any specific symptom? Well, there's two questions, one from a listener and one from myself. One from the listeners, how would you know if you've been implanted? Like, is there a specific mark or anything to look for? And then my second question, I'll ask both, and I'll just let you guys talk. The second question is, you know what? We're almost coming up to break. We have about a minute and a half, so I'll take the second question after break. Go ahead with the first question. The first. All right, you know what? There we go. We got caught by the break. We'll answer both questions when we come back. How about that, guys? Stay tuned. You don't want to miss the rest of the interview. James and Dave are going to tell you what to look for and for in-depth information about both their cases. It wasn't easy. Welcome back to the show, guys. Monday, listen to me, I'm already getting ahead of myself. Sunday, May 22nd, 2011. And I have two special guests on today talking about RFID implants, gang stalking, and the personal stuff that they've been through. And it's Mr. James Walbert and Mr. Dave Larson. And both of them have been telling everybody so far about the personal stuff that they've been through. And during the break, I had a really interesting conversation with both of them. But before I digress onto my little theory about this, and I'll let both of them to respond to my theory, I want to be able to answer the two questions. So do either of you know, the first question which was posed before we went to break was, do either of you have any idea of indications of what to look for so that people can maybe check themselves? And the other question was, how are people implanted without their knowledge? So I'll let you both answer. Dave, you go first, and then James, you can answer after Dave. Go ahead.
All right, thank you, Popeye. Yeah, no, I know exactly how the biomedical product is surreptitiously deployed. The clinical term is retrograde amnesia. There are certain drugs, such as ketamine, that are very high in retrograde amnesia properties. And basically what retrograde amnesia is retrograde amnesia is a condition where if you're administered a drug such as ketamine, and the doctor counts you out backwards from 100, you will not only not remember what happened to you while you were under the effects of the anesthesia, you will not remember what happened to you a half an hour before you were put out. So there is a clinical term for it, and it's called retrograde amnesia. Now, as far as how can somebody tell if they're implanted, that's another issue. Like I said, the CIA has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and have spent decades refining a capability to surreptitiously deploy and use the biomedical product. So there's two conditions here that I think are present. There are people who have been affected by it and they don't know it, and there are people who have been affected by it and they do know it. Now, both conditions can exist, and I think it depends how the government wants to use the biomedical product. If they want to deploy a biomedical product on an elected official or even a member of Congress, they can do so, and they can do so surreptitiously. However, they can also significantly abuse people, interrogate them, abuse them, and at that point it becomes pretty obvious to people when they're affected. I also know that a couple of things. Number one is that significant efforts have been made to develop this product in a way that it does not show up on clinical radiology. So it is very possible for an implanted person to go get a radiology scan and have it not show anything. It is also possible, such in my instance, there's been cases where I have actually successfully obtained MRI scans of the biomedical product, and there have been instances in which national security letters and other national security provisions have been used to try to obstruct medical care, to try to mitigate the problems that are created when a victim obtains proof. And the government does have mechanisms to squelch oversight, investigation, medical care. Now that we're in this post-9/11 era, there are a lot of counter-terror and national security mechanisms that are exploited to prevent somebody from getting the medical care that they would normally otherwise get, that would prevent the FBI from investigating and these other kind of things. So this war on terror has been exploited for a lot of things, and that's problematic.
Yeah, I would agree 1,000% that it's been exploited, and it's what Eisenhower warned us of. James, do you know of any things to look for? Like in your experience, I believe you said you had bloody ears when you woke up. I mean, is there something specific that people can look for, maybe that would lead them to maybe go get checked out or at least try to find the implant? I know Dave just said some of the implants might not even be able to be seen by an MRI, but is there any way that people can at least somewhat check themselves to see, lost time, anything like that?
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's definitely going to be, a physiological effect on your body, as well as physiological attributes that, something took place, the overt signs of mine, it was an overwhelming, it's just like people have said, the evidence pretty much just fell right in my lap, as far as discovering my own. Who'd ever done the actual neural prosthetic placement through my ears? My right one had been done well enough to the point that there was very, very little blood on my Q-tip, and it could have been brushed off or mistaken for, maybe like an inner ear infection or something. But my left ear had been trashed so bad, who had ever done it either was in a hurry, I was waking up, or there was a point of concern, for them to jack it up so bad. And it's still jacked up to this day. But my left ear, it wasn't just a little bit of blood. I got to clarify it that when I stuck my Q-tip in my ear and I pulled it back out, there was enough blood on my Q-tip that it was dripping off of my Q-tip. and I could take my fingers and squeeze it, and it would drip off into the sink. So it wasn't something that was mistaken for an ear infection or inner ear wax that had been down there for a while or something. It's not something that was, easily brushed off as, a lack of, hygienic care. It was very, very obvious that something had happened. The thing that was one of the things that had tipped me off. Of course, it was more than obvious something had happened. But the second thing that had tipped me off is that I started noticing nervous system stimulations. Now, and what I mean by that is that it's not something that is normal. When you can taste electricity pour through your mouth, like having a 9-volt battery hooked up to your neck. I mean, and that's what I'm touching base on here, is that is a more than obvious sign that it's not just, like chronic halitosis, which is basically just, bacteria that builds up in your mouth, or an inner mouth, or an esophageal bacterial infection. This is something that is very definitive. You can taste it in your mouth, much like when you were a kid and you'd pick up a 9-volt battery and stick it to your tongue. That's what it feels like, to the point where my muscles will start to tremor, my body will start to shake. It's almost like, they're attempting a grand mal seizure of some kind, or, something along those lines. But those were the things that had tipped me off, was that I had never had any, physiological problems before at all. I'd spent most of my youth very athletic. I was very athletic within boxing and lots of martial arts training. I was in track. I played basketball. I was very athletic. I've always been in really good shape. Even at the age of 40, I'm in really super good shape. So, I started noticing, as I'm getting older now and being an outspoken victim of it, of course they started to pound me harder. I'm starting to show like an atrophitic effect on my muscles. They're starting to become smooth, very stiff and rigid, and it's not something that is, due to the fact of, just sitting around or being lazy, or, due to immobilization, of my lifestyle. Of not near as active as I used to be. I'm still pretty active, but those are attributes that I would,
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy
being implanted
theories
myself.
Concerning the attacks of September
All right,
11th,
James, we're going to break. Hang on to that thought. Listeners, stick around. We're only going to be gone for a few minutes. We've got to pay some bills. We'll be right back. You're listening to Down the Rabbit Hole. Your host, Popeye. This is the Orion Talk Radio Network. Micro 1650 AM.
As I continue to blame the Knights Templar and the Hospitallers, the real reason New York lost their towers. Don't sit back or hesitate to react to the impact. Many taking a nap. In fact, they would fake an attack to make way for the Patriot.
Welcome back, guys. This is Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Popeye from federaljack.com. Check my website out. I update it as often as I can. It's got tons of movies, articles. It's a virtual archive of knowledge. All right. Today I'm joined by two guests who have been courageous enough to come out and tell their stories about what they've been through. They've been gracious enough to ask or answer questions that have been asked of them. Now I'm going to throw a hypothesis out to them, and I'm going to ask them both what their theories are. Now, before I say this, people may say, "Oh, Popeye, don't you?" Hey guys, do you hear a little bit of an echo? Do either of you have a computer on in the background at all?
No.
Okay. See, I wonder if it's every once in a while I hear a little echo, and I wonder if it's your cell phone playing with the chip. That's interesting. So just even more evidence to prove, because I know that does happen. I know if people have chips, I know sometimes that it interferes with cell phone calls, and I know sometimes radio signals and things get interfered. So interesting, very interesting. All right, continuing. Here, my theory on the whole thing is this. I believe in aliens and UFOs and everything like that, but when it comes to alien abductions and people getting implants in them from aliens and all these stories, I think that was actually the government and private foundation. And I don't mean the whole government. I just mean the shadow government, a portion of, again, the government is just a tool, it's not the government, it's the people that use it, but I believe that this small agency, I'm sure along with private corporations and stuff like the military industrial complex, I believe that they were the ones that kidnapping people and injecting them with these chips to test them out, to test out the capabilities, and then implanting the false memory of, aliens doing it to cover up what they did. I believe that there's aliens. I believe that there's whatever you want to call them, more intelligent beings out there. I don't believe that humans are the cream of the crop. I think it would be ignorant and arrogant for humans to think that. But I don't believe they're, invading now or kidnapping people. They did that thousands of years ago if you go and read all these old texts. So I think that stuff is being played off and used to cover their crimes and to scare people and everything else, because they do have an agenda with that whole thing. But I do think in this aspect, it's also being used to cover the crimes of what they do to people like you guys, drugging you guys somehow, going in, implanting you. And then if you happen to wake up and remember it, those are the people that, get the false memory implants so that they can cover it up. So, James, you first, and then Dave, go ahead and, what do you think of that hypothesis?
No, I think, you probably could, be on the right track there. I've never thought, logically to myself, I would have to agree with you that we're not the only things, we're not the only beings that are here. I mean, it's biblically described as well as socially explained and scientifically confirmed that without a doubt. But, what a better way to flabbergast the crime or to exaggerate the crime or blow it completely out of, to epic proportions than to have, the false memory, reiterated onto the victim over and over again to make them believe that, some abduction from a gray had been, taken care of. In my recent attempts to get these devices removed from my body, find it to be rather comical. I had several private investigators. I mean, these are professionals. They're very, very credible, very reputable. They're owners of their own investigation agencies. Together, they have like the 60, 70 years investigation experience. Just William J. Taylor himself alone is looking at 50 years of investigative, investigatory experience. So keeping that in mind, I had actually gone out on a limb and thought maybe Dr. Roger Lear would be a good person, to contact to have this device removed. Well, I showed him all the documentation, ran the MRI by him, had professionals contact him because they're not going to believe a layman like myself. So I always have, professionals or credible individuals that are involved with any point of contact or anything like that, so that they, are not, in a questionable state. If there's no derogatory comments being made, but he had noted and cited that there's most definitely foreign bodies, but he says it appears that your foreign bodies are of a human origin, and we don't deal with any implants of a human origin at all. So, is this guy, stuck in place to, by the government, or is he self-driven? I mean, there's a point of credibility there that concerns me, because I'm showing neurological as well as pathological physical injuries to my body due to neurological stimulations. And these things, and these were in-house tests. These weren't something that were contracted out. The Dr. Hildegard Stanager of Integrative Health Systems in Los Angeles, California, she's a PhD scientist. Okay, so she definitely knows her P's and Q's and the ins and outs about what's going on. And she had tested my nervous system and had found that the electrical output of these devices were the amplification of several hundred times my normal capacity of these implants. So it's something that is very, very important that people know that these are stimulation devices as well as neural disrupting devices. To touch base back on your theoretical application, these beings that we know them as, they're flying through space, for God's sakes. They've got, intergalactical, communication as well as transport. So they're far beyond any logical realm that we could ever imagine. So, these are not something that's being done, with to some alien. These are things that are being done, and those, I truly feel that program is specifically designed to target us individuals to discredit it even that much further. So that's what my goal is now, is to try to undo a little bit of that field of crap, and try to actually reapply a little bit of credibility to these victims by doing the interviews with elected officials, as well as private investigators, clinical psychologists, and medical doctors that own their own clinics. These are professionals that I'm doing these shows with, so that's what's most important.
I agree 100%. Dave, what's your take?
To summarize kind of what's going on, yes, the government does have top cover. They're always going to have top cover. They're always going to have some plausible deniability. They're always going to be able to do certain things that are repulsive, and they're always going to be able to discredit the people who have been victimized by the activities, and that's something that's been around for a long time. To put this in summary, I think there's something very clear that we need to establish here, and that is there has to be a line between these government activities which are directed at real terrorists who wish to do us harm by any means necessary. They can use military force and all these things to prevent future attacks, and that's fine. And I don't think anybody has a problem with that. But I think where we've seen a problem is when the intelligence personnel involved or a rogue administration such as the Bush administration, when they overreach and they use these provisions in a partisan manner or a political manner or in a manner that's unhealthy for our nation, that's when it's imperative that the other branches of government come in, they assert their role as a check and balance. There's a reason we have a democratic system of checks and balances. There's a reason we have separation of powers within our form of government, and that is so that the other branches of government can place one of the others in check when they get out of control. And I'd like to, now we can spend a lot of time talking about what happened to me, and although I am an elected official at the county level, I became very disturbed, and there's three issues I have that I have brought to the attention of the Attorney General in a formal manner. Number one was the deployment of biomedical product on juvenile children. The intelligence community obtained such a precedent for using enhanced interrogation techniques on children after an Army intelligence officer named Sam Provance testified in Washington about an instance in which a 17 or 16-year-old son of a real terrorist was subjected to EITs as part of an effort to prevent future attacks. Now, the interaction with these biomedical devices is also considered an enhanced interrogation technique. Now, the problem I have is that when they use a 16 or 17-year-old son to establish a precedent for using EITs on juveniles, that's one thing. But the problem I have is that former deputy director of CIA, a man named Stephen Kappas.
You know what, Dave, hold that thought because we're going into break. Stand by. Guys,
all right,
stay tuned. We'll be right back. You're listening to Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Popeye from FederalJack.com. Welcome back, everyone. This is the final segment of Down the Rabbit Hole. It's Sunday, May 20th. The break, I was actually having a very interesting conversation with both of my guests. And Dave, you and I were discussing how it's disturbing that not only they could get in your house without you knowing and hit you with ketamine, they have the heart attack gun, so Lord knows they could dart you at any point, you know what I mean, and have you go out and then get in. But you were making a great point how it's appalling that the fact that they do this, but it's even worse that they're doing it against the American public, which violates the very that created the CIA to begin with. So it's violating law.
Absolutely. In fact, what I was saying was that former Deputy Director Stephen Kappas has been involved in interacting with medical devices that were placed in a child who was only about 2 years, 10 months old when she was targeted with biomedical product. We're talking about a little American child on a tricycle. She was about 3 years old when Stephen Kappus was involved in directing enhanced interrogation tactics at the little girl. And this was a focused effort to provoke the adult into some response. And the problem I have with that is that now they're victimizing a little child as part of an effort to get to the adult. And one of the big issues there is the way that the intelligence community went about establishing a precedent for doing so. What they showed Congress in order to establish a precedent for using EITs on juveniles was certainly not a 3-year-old American on a tricycle. That probably would have resulted in somebody getting rolled up and sent to prison. When they obtained that precedent, they did so by showing Congress an instance, and this was when Sam Provance, an Army intelligence officer, came to Washington and testified about an instance in which interrogators in Abu Ghraib subjected a 16 or a 17-year-old son of a real terrorist to EITs as part of an effort to prevent future attacks. Now, that's very different than what Stephen Kappus did to a little girl who was on a tricycle in California. So if there's one thing that I could stress to Congress, it would be that when we're asked to deliberate over something, such as using EITs on juveniles, it is very important that the Congress not consider only the cherry-picked example that is being used as an example, such as the 17-year-old, because the intelligence personnel will argue that EITs are EITs and a juvenile is a juvenile. So what goes for the 17-year-old juvenile in Abu Ghraib also goes for the 3-year-old in California, because they're right. An EIT is an EIT and a juvenile is a juvenile. And subsequently, here's one thing that has motivated me to speak out about this, is that there is a history at the CIA of directing intelligence activities at the Congress. Watergate is a prime example. There were intelligence activities directed at Democrats at Watergate. The President of the United States was impeached and indicted. The Watergate burglars were rolled up and sent to prison. And I think that was appropriate and necessary. I believe that there was a lot more going on at Watergate than just a phone tap. Some very reputable sources, such as the CIA Inspector General's report, has disclosed to us that even back then, during that era, CIA was using devices for remote monitoring of physiological signals. And the CIA IG is a very reputable source. If the CIA IG back in 1963 said that CIA was using implantable medical devices as part of MKUltra, then I assure you he's correct. And I assure you CIA was engaged in those activities. Now, here's what's also very disturbing, is that this current Attorney General, Eric Holder, has authorized intelligence personnel to interact with medical devices that were placed in my person while I was acting in my capacity as an elected official at the county level. My case is very well documented. I've had medical doctors remove some of the medical devices that were placed by contract personnel. My case is very well documented. I have an informal relationship with contract personnel. I've been directly involved in their R&D activities since March 1997. I've obtained through Freedom of Information copies of the FCC licenses that have been used to interact with the medical devices. I have a case pending before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals right now, in which I'm seeking injunctive relief, ordering the Central Intelligence Agency to cease and desist interacting with these medical devices, because it is very disturbing when not only are they doing so while meeting minutes are being recorded, while government functions are going on. We're talking about interacting with medical devices that have been implanted in an elected official domestically here in the United States. And what is really disturbing is that the Attorney General would authorize such a thing. In my opinion, there's no excuse for it. Now, currently, I have brought these allegations to the attention of the Inspector General, and there, I believe, is an active pending investigation, and I can't comment too much on that, but this investigation has proceeded to what they call the Council of the Inspector General, and the Council of the Inspector General is a conglomeration of several Inspector Generals from different agencies who are now reviewing these activities, and to be honest with you, I don't think the activities stand the light of day. I think the authorizations of the Attorney General place our democracy in peril. And there is some political abuse of this implantable biomedical technology. A lot of people don't know this, but one of the things that allows the government to do this to somebody is the existence of a drug nexus. The Ronald Reagan era war on drug executive order allows the government to use military force in response to any felony drug nexus. So any felony drug use from an American could result in military force being used against you, according to Ron Reagan's war on drugs executive order. And what is really disturbing is it didn't take long for H.W. Bush to misuse that provision. The former Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court was laying in a hospital bed claiming that the CIA was after him. William Rehnquist was the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. He was in a hospital bed publicly alleging the CIA was after him, and the excuse was, well, that William Rehnquist took more than the prescribed amount of a prescription narcotic, so that constitutes a drug nexus. Now it makes it okay to use military force against the man who is Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. And what makes this really amazing is that William Rehnquist's judgment, his sound judgment and sound state of mind, made him a candidate to be the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. His sound judgment had the entire Congress and Senate confirm him not to be any justice, but the Chief Justice of the highest court in the land, the U.S. Supreme Court. So now here's a man with the utmost in sound, solid judgment. But the moment he says the CIA is after him, now all of a sudden he's discredited and he's a drug user and he's insane. And we've seen this too many times. Too many times have people come with solid, fact-based allegations, and the government tries to say, oh, that's crazy. And the problem is that there has to be a line. When the White House starts to use this biomedical product on elected officials, on judges, they are across the line, and it is absolutely vital that the judicial branch step in and do something about it, and that the legislative branch come in and they do something about it. They must assert their authority as a check and balance and as equal branches of government. And we haven't seen that sort of thing since this war on terror. What we've seen is almost a monarchical, imperialistic view of executive authority, where executive authority reigns supreme, and these other two branches of government are at the whim of the White House. And it's disgusting, Popeye. We need to do something about this, because there is a reason we have three separate individual branches of government. And I have brought formal allegations, and I believe it has been substantiated, that there is at least one person who has acted in their capacity as a member of the 112th Congress. That's our current Congress. There is at least one person who has acted in his or her capacity as a member of the Congress with biomedical product in their body or person.
Do you want to, just so you know, when people make allegations like that, a lot of times they end up dead. So do you want to just name the person so that way it kind of covers you? And I'm not saying that to be dramatic. I'm saying because you have about a minute and a half left, and that's a severe allegation. So do you just want to cover your bases really quick?
To name the identity of the affected individual?
Yeah, if you could, or some way.
I could, but I'm going to refuse, because I think it could be that could be problematic.
Okay, well, let me put it this way: is there any way somebody could back? Is there any way? Well, why do you think that? I'll leave it on that. Why do you think that?
There's articles of evidence that I've obtained through my informal relationship with contract personnel, and I just want to give you a generalization here. It has long been accepted to spy upon Congress. Even back during the Nixon era, there were directors of Central Intelligence who publicly said, if we can't spy on Capitol Hill and get away with it, we have no business being in intelligence. They in their culture, it's like their birthright to spy on Congress. And now the problem is that when you start talking about this biomedical product, we're not talking about spying upon them. We're talking about spying upon them and manipulating their behavior.
And like you said, that's a scary thought, that they could manipulate, members of Congress or the president, who knows. you know,
or the Chief Justice.
Yeah, the people in the courts, it's very scary, you know, Orwellian thing to even think about. Guys, it's the end of my show. Thank you both for coming on as my guests. You are welcome to come on anytime in the future. I'm going to bring you on in the future to update both your stories and your cases and everything.